I will state my name for the record, though I understand it will be redacted before this deposition enters the tribunal's archive. I was systems officer aboard the Ardavith reclamation vessel Recovered Right, ninth ship of the Sovereignty Commission's reclamation expedition, designated Fleet Tail and Sensor Relay. I was the only member of that expedition to return. I am telling you what I saw, in the order I saw it, and I am asking you to seal this account when I am finished. Not because I am ashamed of it, because I do not want it cited as precedent by anyone who reads it too quickly and mistakes survival for permission. The Commission had spent 11 years building the legal case. I will not rehearse it for you, you have the filings, but the core argument was simple enough. The sovereignty sector had been Ardavith territory before the buffer zone was formalized. The buffer was drawn after the Survey Authority's exclusion protocols were ratified 2017 years ago. The Commission's position was that the exclusion had been imposed unilaterally, without Ardavith consent, and that the sector's pre-buffer designation as Ardavith Ancestral Space gave the Commission the standing to reclaim it under the restoration of prior tenure clauses. 11 years of filings, 7 rounds of authority review, a final denial on procedural grounds that the Commission's lead advocate called, in public session, a deliberate suppression of rightful claim. I was 26 years into my survey career when the Commission contracted the expedition. I took the posting because the pay was substantial, and because I told myself the legal question was not mine to resolve. I was a systems officer. I would monitor sensors and log readings and follow the Fleet Tail protocol, and whatever political outcome the Commission achieved was the Commission's business. I have spent the months since my return deciding how I feel about that reasoning. I have not finished deciding. We entered the sovereignty sector at the Ardavith approach, the Commission-designated entry vector on the sector's trailing edge, on the 44th day of the expedition. Fleet Commander Orev Dasith ordered all ships to full sensor array and reduced thrust. The Commission's scientific advisors had argued that the sector would be substantially uninhabited. 2,000 years of buffer enforcement had left it outside any settled traffic corridor, and the advisors' projections showed it as ecologically dormant, its pre-exclusion infrastructure long decayed. I had read the projections. I had also read the Survey Authority's denial letters, which said nothing about the sector's ecological status. They said only that the approach was not permitted. They did not say why. The first thing I noted was the quiet. I do not mean silence. The sensor array was reading normally background radiation at standard range, thermal gradients consistent with a star system at mid-cycle, no anomalous mass signatures. What I mean is that there was no traffic debris, no dormant relay buoys, no microwave scatter from old station infrastructure. 2,000 years is a long time, and infrastructure does decay, but there are residue signatures, metallic particulates, outgassed polymers, the faint crystalline scatter of ruptured hull plating that persist across that span. I had charted decommissioned buffer stations older than this sector's exclusion and found their residue signatures intact. The sovereignty sector had none. Whatever had been here before the buffer was drawn was not decayed. It was gone in a way that does not leave residue. I logged it. I flagged it to the fleet's science lead, a commission advisor named Velith Corin, who had spent most of the transit corridor explaining to the junior crew why the authorities' objections were bureaucratic overreach. Velith Corin looked at my log entry, told me residue dissipation was within expected range for a dormant sector, and closed the flag. On the second day inside the sector, the Recovered Right's long-range passive array returned a contact, thermal, bearing inner system, at a distance that placed it well past the sector's primary orbital zone. The contact was large, not ship scale, not station scale. I ran the return 3 times. The mass profile was consistent with a planetary body, which was consistent with the Commission's pre-expedition surveys. What was not consistent was the thermal signature. A body of that mass, in that orbital position, at mid-cycle star output, should have been reading at a temperature range I can express in 7 digits. It was reading cold. Not anomalously cold, not the cold of a body in shadow. The cold of a body that was managing its own thermal output. Actively. Below detection threshold on standard array. I caught it only because Fleet Tail protocol requires passive long range on a sensitivity setting that the forward ships were not running. I logged it. I flagged it to Velith Corin again. I received no response this time. On the third day, the forward ships began to report navigational interference. Minor course corrections of less than 1 degree, attributed to an uncharted gravitational gradient in the intersystem approach. Fleet Commander Dasseth ordered reduced speed and continued. On the fourth day, the interference increased. The Commission's science advisors attributed it to the decay of old mining infrastructure in the primary orbital zone, collapsed mass concentrations from pre-exclusion extraction. I was running the Fleet Tail passive array and I was watching the gravitational return, and I want to state clearly for the record that the interference was not random. It was structured. The corrections it imposed on the forward ships were taking them, gradually, onto a tighter approach vector than Fleet Commander Dasseth had ordered. Not by much, not enough to trigger automated alerts. Enough that, over 36 hours, the formation had shifted from a standard entry arc to something closer to a single-file column, nose toward inner system, with the Fleet Tail with me, positioned furthest from the primary. I transmitted a navigational analysis to the Fleet Command channel. I showed the vector drift. I showed the 36-hour progression. I showed that the interference was not random. The response from Fleet Commander Dasseth was logged, and I assume you have it. He thanked me for the analysis and noted that the Commission's science team had reviewed the drift data and attributed it to the gravitational modeling artifacts of an older star chart overlay that had not been corrected for the sector's actual mass distribution. I am not certain what I would have done had the fleet not gone silent 18 hours later. I say silent. The ships did not disappear from my sensor array immediately. The forward 3 ships, the Restoration Claim, the Ancestral Warrant, and the prior title went a minimal beacon output simultaneously at 317 Fleet Standard, not off, minimal, a status a ship enters when it is managing a low-power situation or running silent by command. The next 4 ships followed within 6 minutes. The 8th ship, the Renewed Standing, held standard beacon output for 11 more minutes. Then it too dropped to minimal. Then its beacon stopped entirely. The Renewed Standing's beacon did not resume. I did not follow the formation inward. I want to be precise about this, because the Commission's subsequent inquiry implied that I abandoned the expedition. I did not. I was Fleet Tail. My navigational analysis had been dismissed. I had flagged an anomalous thermal contact, an anomalous residue absence, and a structured gravitational interference pattern, and all 3 flags had been closed or ignored. What I had before me, at 334 Fleet Standard on the 4th day inside the Sovereignty Sector, was a formation of 8 ships on minimal beacon, 1 ship with no beacon, and a passive long-range array showing the same thermal contact I had logged 2 days prior. Same position, same managed cold signature, no change, as though whatever was producing it had not needed to move. I withdrew to the sector boundary. I spent 14 hours there monitoring. The 8 ships on minimal beacon remained on minimal beacon. None resumed full output. No emergency transmissions. No distress signals on any channel. No debris returns on the passive array. 8 ships, 612 crew, in a sector that looked exactly as it had when we entered it, except that they were not responding and I could not raise them. I crossed back out of the sector at the Ardavith approach and set course for the nearest Survey Authority relay station. I filed a preliminary report on arrival. I have been in authority custody since. What I want to say to this tribunal, and what I want sealed in this record, is not a theory about what happened to the other 8 ships. I do not have one. I have a thermal contact reading cold at the wrong temperature, a gravitational interference pattern that was structured and directional, and the absence of residue that should have persisted across 2 millennia. I have 8 ships that went to minimal beacon and did not come back. That is the complete factual record of what I observed. What I want to say is this. The sovereignty sector was not empty. It was not dormant. It was not waiting to be reclaimed. And whatever the Commission's legal case established about prior tenure and buffer zone ratification, the sector had its own position on the question, and it had held that position for 2,000 years without finding it necessary to file a single document. The Commission's claim is the Commission's business. I'm a systems officer. I logged what I saw and I flagged it, and I am here. I have nothing further to add to the record.